Presidents are often judged by their speeches, policies, or re-election campaigns. But in this case, one president's entire legacy would come down to a single act, whether he'd be remembered as the man who ended the bloodshed or as the one who gave terrorists legitimacy. For 2 long years, the nation had been gripped by a brutal internal war. Cities once humming with life now echoed with the sound of gunfire. Markets lay deserted, schools shuttered, families torn apart. The enemy wasn't a foreign army. It was a militant separatist group, once seen as disorganized radicals, now grown into a force that controlled entire districts. They had taken territory, kidnapped political figures, and assassinated journalists. To the people, they were monsters. To some in the remote hills, they were revolutionaries. The president? Daniel Rahim, a man both respected and deeply criticized. He had risen to office with a promise: unity through strength. But what happens when strength alone can't bring peace? For months, Rahim's cabinet had warned against it. The generals threatened resignation. The intelligence community called it reckless. But behind closed doors, Daniel had come to a conclusion he couldn't say out loud. We can't bomb our way out of this. The war had claimed over 70,000 lives, mostly civilians. Roads were mined, communication towers reduced to rubble, and hospitals turned to morgues. His approval ratings had plummeted, not because the public thought he was too weak, but because they thought he had no idea what to do next. Then, one day, an encrypted message arrived from unknown node message. We will talk. One-on-one, in person, no media, no army, just you and me. Attached was a name, Malik Dar, leader of the separatist movement, a man so feared his name alone was used to terrify children into silence. Rahim stared at the screen for a long time. Everyone would tell him not to respond. Which is exactly why he decided to respond. The meeting would take place in a remote mountain village near the conflict zone. No press, no bodyguards, no signal jammers, just a small wooden mosque on a hill surrounded by dust and clouds. A president meeting a terrorist with no witness, no filter, and no safety net. The next 72 hours were chaos. National security chiefs begged him to reconsider. Sir, if anything happens to you, the state collapses. What if this is a trap? What if they broadcast your death live? But Daniel had already made up his mind. We've already lost everything except the idea of peace, he told them. If I'm afraid to walk into a room, I have no right to lead this country. Only 3 people knew about the trip. 1, his chief of staff. 2, the head of domestic intelligence. 3, his wife, even his vice president, wasn't informed. On the morning of the journey, Daniel wore no suit. He dressed like a common man. Simple tunic, scarf over his shoulder, no security detail, no press vehicle. Just one aging Land Cruiser driven by a retired colonel he trusted more than his own cabinet. As they left the city and entered rebel territory, the roads turned from asphalt to dirt. At checkpoints, fighters stared at them with hollow eyes, guns lazily slung across their backs. But they were allowed to pass. Without a word. By sunset, the car rolled into the dusty village. No media, no drones, no flags, just smoke from cooking fires and children peeking from behind broken wooden doors. They parked near a mosque, barely standing. A figure waited at the gate. No weapon, no guards, no mask, just a man in his 40s with gray streaks in his beard and a face hardened by years of war. Malik Dar. He extended his hand, and Daniel shook it. Inside the mosque, the two sat facing each other on worn prayer rugs. There was no translator, no cameras, no script, just silence. And then, Dar spoke first. Why did you come? Daniel replied, because your people keep dying, and so do mine. And somewhere along the way, we forgot they were ever the same people. Dar smirked. You think peace is a handshake? I think peace is a decision, Daniel said. One neither of us can afford to keep avoiding. The conversation lasted over 4 hours. Voices were never raised, but every sentence carried the weight of decades. Dar accused the government of betrayal, of land theft, of targeting his people. Daniel didn't deny it. He said simply, "We failed. I won't defend it. I'll change it." At one point, Dar said, "My men will never accept surrender." And Daniel replied, "Then don't surrender. Share. The land, the economy, the voice, we create a new map, or we die drawing old lines in blood." That night, they sat quietly, listening to the wind push dust through the broken window panes. Finally, Malik Dar said, "I'll consider it, not because I trust you, but because I saw you walk here with nothing. I'll consider it. Not because I trust you, but because I saw you walk here with nothing." Daniel nodded. "That's exactly how I'll leave too." They shook hands again. This time it wasn't about symbolism, it was about possibility. Two enemies sat down, not to agree, but to stop the bleeding. Drop a "If you believe peace starts with showing up," and subscribe for part 2, where Daniel returns home to a nation on edge, and not everyone is happy he survived. No gunshots, no threats, no roads blocked, just endless stretches of dirt and silence, almost like the country itself was holding its breath. President Daniel Rahim sat in the back of the Land Cruiser, eyes fixed on the distant skyline growing larger with each mile. In his hands, a single note written on old paper: "We'll give you 30 days. Show us your sincerity, or we walk." Malik Dar, 30 days. That's how long he had to start changing a country that had been broken for 30 years. As the vehicle neared the capital, his phone began vibrating relentlessly. Dozens of missed calls, text messages stacked, emails with red flags and blinking headlines. The media had caught wind of something. Not the deal. Not yet. But the disappearance. Where had the president gone? Why had he vanished without security? And when he returned, why did he look different? The moment Daniel stepped back into the presidential palace, his chief of staff met him with a tense face. "They know something happened." "Let them guess," Daniel said. "Not for long. The press secretary is asking for a briefing. Your cabinet is waiting, and the opposition leader is calling it a national betrayal." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "He doesn't even know what I did." "Doesn't matter. He just knows it wasn't war." In the cabinet room, the air was thick with judgment. Senior generals, ministry heads, and intelligence officers sat in a semicircle, eyes locked on their returning president. No one clapped. No one smiled. They wanted answers. Daniel didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table, rested both palms on the wood, and said, "I met with Malik Dar. Alone. In person. No protection. No backup." The silence broke instantly. "You did what?" "That man is a murderer. He should have been shot on sight." Daniel held his ground. "I didn't go there to surrender. I went to stop more coffins." The defense minister stood, red in the face. "He should be behind bars, not shaking hands with the President of the Republic." "So should half the men who funded this war," Daniel shot back. The room froze again. He continued, "You think I'm naive, but the naive thing is believing we can bomb a generation into obedience. That's not strategy. That's slow genocide." The finance minister leaned in. "What does he want? A seat in parliament? Autonomy?" "No," Daniel said. "He wants roads, schools, clean water, and yes, he wants representation. Not as a favor, as a right." The room erupted again. "He's playing you. You'll be handing our country to warlords. The people won't stand for this." Daniel looked up. "Then let's ask them." The cabinet went silent. He had just said the one thing politicians feared most. Let the people decide. That night, Daniel recorded a national address. No special lighting, no flag in the background. Just him, seated at his desk, tie loosened, voice steady. He looked into the lens and spoke. My fellow citizens, for 2 years we've been told peace is impossible, that some people are beyond redemption. Today, I challenge that. I met with the man many of you see as our greatest enemy, and I told him what I now tell you. This country is broken, not because we are different, but because we stopped listening to the differences. I have 30 days to show that we can rebuild without blood. I'm asking you to give me that chance. Within hours, the address was everywhere. Some praised it as courageous. Others called it national suicide. Talk shows exploded. The president is negotiating with killers. He's the first leader with real guts. This is either genius or the end. Meanwhile, in the hills, Malik Dar sat in a makeshift bunker, watching the same broadcast on an old laptop. His commanders urged skepticism. He's playing to the cameras. He'll send drones next. But Dar sat quietly, paused the video, replayed one line. This country is broken because we stopped listening to the differences. He muttered, That's new. In the capital, protests broke out. Some in support, lighting candles, holding signs that read 30 days for peace. Others shouted outside the palace gates, No talks with terrorists. Blood can't buy peace. The country had become a mirror. One side wanted justice. The other just wanted silence to return. Behind closed doors, Daniel's wife, Layla, placed her hand over his. You know they're going to try to end you for this, right? He looked at her. I'm not trying to be loved. I'm trying to be right. For the first time in decades, ceasefire talks were scheduled, covertly. Malik's men and the military would meet under surveillance in neutral zones. Maps were brought out, lines redrawn, casualties recounted. No one trusted anyone. But no one walked away either. Day 10 of the truce. A convoy delivering medical supplies reached a rebel-controlled district for the first time in 2 years. Local children lined the roads. Mothers wept as vaccines arrived. Fighters put down their rifles to carry boxes of aid. Photos went viral, and for once, war didn't trend. Hope did. In trying to stop a war, Daniel sparked a civil storm. 15 days into the ceasefire, something shifted. Not in the rebel camps, not among the civilians, but inside the presidential palace itself. Daniel Rahim had faced bullets, protests, and political slander. But nothing prepared him for what was coming next. Betrayal from within his own cabinet. It started small. A leak. One of the national newspapers published a classified document. A summary of the ceasefire terms that had only been circulated among 7 people. The document implied that the president was offering amnesty to militants who had been on the government's most wanted list. Which wasn't true. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. Within hours, public outrage reignited. The headline screamed, "Terrorists to walk free?" Did Rahim just sell the country out? Justice delayed is justice denied. Talk shows flamed it further. Opposition leaders held press conferences. And behind Daniel's back, members of his own government began sharpening knives. At a late-night emergency meeting, his chief of staff showed him the document. Only a few hands touched this. One of them leaked it. Daniel exhaled deeply. Then we find out who. He ordered a full internal audit, encrypted communications, metadata scans, document access logs. Within 48 hours, the truth surfaced. The leak came from the Minister of Defense, Arman Salim, a veteran soldier-turned-politician, once considered a loyal ally. He had served 3 presidents. But this one? This one had gone too far for him. Arman believed peace was weakness. He wanted to finish the war, crush the rebels, burn the hills if needed. Daniel summoned him privately, just the two of them in the West Wing. The air between them was thick with decades of unspoken anger. Daniel didn't yell. He simply asked, "Why?" Arman stared him down. "Because you're making a deal with devils, and I refuse to serve under a man who rewards killers." Daniel stood still. "You don't see it, do you? You think this is about strength. But real strength is restraint. And real leadership means knowing when to stop the bleeding." Arman didn't flinch. "You'll be remembered as the president who bowed to murderers." Daniel stepped forward. "I'll be remembered as the one who refused to add more names to the list of the dead." By nightfall, Arman's resignation was announced, framed as personal. But the political elite knew what it was: a fracture in the regime, and fractures attract pressure. The next day, a car bomb exploded in a marketplace on the capital's east side. 10 civilians killed. No group claimed responsibility. But everyone knew someone was sending a message. The truce had a price, and now that price was being paid in blood. Back at the palace, Daniel stood over photos of the blast. Mothers clutching burned children. Vendors' stalls turned to rubble. Smoke rising above the city like a curse. His advisors waited for his reaction. He said only, "Do we have confirmation it wasn't Malik's men?" They nodded. His commanders condemned it immediately. They said it was an attempt to break the truce. Still, opposition leaders pounced. "This is what peace looks like under Rahim," they shouted in parliament. "Explosions and funerals." Social media was worse. Memes, misinformation, hashtags calling for impeachment. Through it all, Daniel remained still. Not silent, just still. That evening, he returned to the place few presidents ever go: the morgue. He stood alone among the cold steel cabinets, names on toe tags, some of them children. One of them a woman he had met once during a hospital visit. Her name was Ayla. She had served as a nurse during the war. Now she was another statistic in someone else's war message. Daniel whispered, "You deserved better than this." The next morning, he went live on national television. This time the tie was gone. The desk was gone. He stood in front of a wall covered in the names of those lost in the explosion. "We were warned this path would cost us. And still, I believe in it, because I've seen the other option, and it's worse." He pointed to the names behind him. "These aren't casualties of peace. They are victims of those afraid of it." Then came the moment that shocked even his critics. He revealed Arman Salim's betrayal. This leak came from inside, from someone who wanted war more than unity. He's gone now, but the poison he left still lingers. We will continue, because if we stop now, then Ayla and the others died for nothing. The speech went viral, again, not because of eloquence, but because of honesty. Malik Dar saw it, too. This time his reply was public. He posted a single message on social channels: "Peace takes longer than war. We're still here." And just like that, the truce held. Wounded, bruised, but alive. When the enemy is outside, you fight. When the enemy is inside, you decide whether the house still stands. It happened on a Monday, a remote farming village barely known outside its province. Population, 312. A place with no tactical value, no rebel base, no political activists, just families, fields, goats, dust, and by sunrise it no longer existed. The first reports were blurry: radio chatter, a local mayor claiming airstrikes, a viral video of charred ruins and people screaming under collapsed rooftops. By noon, it was confirmed: 41 civilians dead, including 17 children. No confirmed rebel presence, no military convoy nearby, Just bodies. And silence. Daniel Rahim sat in the war room staring at the satellite photos. His security advisor briefed him. "We're tracing the strike. Could have been rogue artillery from a splinter unit. Could have been an attempt to sabotage the ceasefire." Daniel didn't blink. "Find out who gave the order. I want names, not theories." Hours later, a name emerged. Colonel Farouk Siddiqui, loyalist, veteran of the Hill campaigns, decorated, respected, and fiercely opposed to peace talks. Daniel summoned him immediately. Farouk walked in without shame, stood tall, didn't deny it. "Those villagers were feeding rebels," he said flatly. "I made a call." Daniel stepped forward. "You didn't make a call. You executed children." Farouk shrugged. "Collateral. Peace is soft. I acted with strength." The silence in the room was volcanic. Daniel leaned in. "You're dismissed, effective immediately. You'll be tried for war crimes." Farouk smiled, an awful, smug smile. "Try me, but you'll lose the army." Daniel stared. "Then I'll rebuild it, with soldiers who understand that loyalty isn't blind." By evening, the country was on fire. The massacre trended globally. International observers demanded investigations. NGOs condemned the government. Families buried their children with shovels in unmarked dirt. And the ceasefire? Hanging by a thread. Malik Dar issued a statement. "If this is the cost of truce, then we return to war." Daniel held back, no response, not yet. Instead, he flew to the village, alone, no convoy, no media, just him and a few aides, walking through the ashes. What he saw broke him. Half-burned toys, a woman crying into a bowl of rice, whispering to no one. A boy who had watched his siblings die, now mute, staring at Daniel without blinking. The president kneeled down, placed his hand on the boy's shoulder, and whispered, "I am so sorry." No camera caught it. No speech followed, just the sound of wind blowing through what used to be homes. Back in the capital, Daniel prepared a broadcast unlike any before. It wasn't framed in policy. It was framed in grief. He appeared again without a tie, eyes heavy, hands folded. "My countrymen, something monstrous was done in our name. We cannot call ourselves a nation if we cannot protect our weakest." He didn't dodge responsibility. He didn't say, "mistake." He said, "massacre." And then, something no president had done in his country's history, he announced an international tribunal, inviting foreign judges and observers to investigate his own military. The response was explosive. Some called it brave, others called it betrayal. The opposition roared, "He's putting our soldiers on trial to please rebels." But the people? The regular ones? The broken ones? They lit candles, hung photos of the children on doors, wrote letters to Malik Dar asking him not to walk away. Days passed. No reply. Until a single message arrived on a government channel. "One last meeting. You and me. No stage. No cameras." Malik Dar Daniel took the meeting. Again, no convoy, just a car. And silence. They met in an abandoned mosque-turned-relief center. This time, Malik didn't shake hands. He stood with a storm in his eyes. "You said the killing would stop." Daniel nodded slowly. "And now I say this. Help me fix it. From the inside." Malik laughed bitterly. "You think one tribunal will fix graves?" "No," Daniel replied, "but it might prevent the next ones." They stood in silence. Then Malik asked, "Would you have done this if the bomb had landed on your city?" Daniel answered, "It did. I just didn't hear it yet." That line broke something in both of them. Malik nodded, then sat down. A president put his own army on trial. A rebel leader gave peace one more breath. 3 days after the second secret meeting with Malik Dar, a motion was introduced in Parliament. The National Reconciliation Act, a document designed to officially end the war. Grant a structured amnesty, launch reparations for war victims, and begin formal integration of former rebels into civil society. It was historic. It was bold. And it was political suicide. Opposition leaders called it an insult to the military. Nationalists screamed betrayal. Even moderate allies hesitated. Daniel Ibrahim was no longer just fighting for peace. He was fighting to keep his own government intact. The night before the vote, the presidential palace buzzed with panic. One advisor warned, "Sir, if this doesn't pass, they'll launch a no-confidence vote within days." Another said, "Even if it passes, you've made enemies that won't forget." Daniel replied softly, "Then let them remember." In the quiet of his office, he reread the names of the 41 villagers killed in the airstrike. Then he opened a drawer and pulled out the piece of paper Malik had given him weeks earlier. 30 days. Show us your sincerity. Tomorrow, those 30 days would end. Parliament convened under heavy tension. Dozens of MPs wore black in silent protest. Outside the building, thousands gathered. Some held signs saying, "No peace without justice." Others held ones that read, "Enough blood. Vote yes." The chamber echoed with accusations and desperation. Then, Daniel took the floor. The speaker hesitated, but the room fell silent. He stood at the center, not behind the usual podium, but on the main floor where the opposition sat eye to eye. He spoke without notes. "This isn't about me. This isn't about Malik Dar. This is about the mother who told me she buried 2 sons in 1 year. It's about the little girl who flinches every time thunder sounds like a bomb. You want revenge? You already had it. 70,000 dead. You want strength? Then vote for the courage to forgive. Because if we can't stop this war now, we won't be able to explain to the next generation why we chose pride over peace." No applause followed, just silence. Then the speaker called the vote. One by one, the names were read. Yes. No. Yes. Abstain. Each word like a heartbeat. The final count, 102 votes in favor, 98 against. The bill passed, by 4 votes. The chamber erupted. Some cheered, others stormed out. But Daniel stood still, eyes closed, breathing deep, because now came the real test. Implementation. The next morning, Malik Dar and his commanders arrived in the capital, unarmed. For the first time, they walked into a government building not as fugitives, but as future partners. Some staff refused to shake their hands. Others wept quietly. But the world watched, because a country at war for 2 decades had done something few ever do: survive its own hate. Rebuilding began immediately. Demilitarization zones were mapped. New police academies were opened. Victim restitution funds were activated. And in one symbolic moment, a former rebel and a former army officer planted a tree together at the National Memorial Garden. Still, it wasn't smooth. Riots broke out in pockets of resistance. A bomb was discovered under a bridge. Social media was a storm of fury and celebration. But the worst didn't happen. The truce held. The army remained loyal. And Daniel? He remained in office, barely. 6 months later, Daniel Ibrahim stood in a small village, the same village where the war had claimed its earliest casualties. He unveiled a monument, no names, no faces, just a line carved into stone. We will be remembered not for how long we fought, but for how finally we chose to stop. In his final year of presidency, Daniel declined to run again. In a televised message, he said, "I never wanted to rule forever. I just wanted to live long enough to see peace." He smiled. And I did. At the airport the day he departed office, A boy stood waiting, the same mute child from the bombed village. He held a drawing. It showed two men under a flag, shaking hands. He handed it to Daniel without speaking. Daniel bent down, took the boy's hand, and said, "You'll never need to learn the language of war." Then he walked toward his plane. No bodyguards, just the sound of wind. He met with a terrorist to stop a war. He risked his presidency, his life, and his legacy. Not to be remembered, but to be useful.